Is there something big on your horizon? Do you sense a need for personal breakthrough? Are you ready to take your spiritual life to the next level? If your answer is yes, I'd like you to urge and consider prayer and fasting. We're giving you an opportunity this coming Thursday to pray and fast because that is a big day in the life of your local church. On that day, JC's going to be ordained. He'll be installed as our church planter. And in the OPC, that's what we call setting him apart to be a home missionary. This Thursday, we are heeding the Great Commission, and we are answering the call to launch something big in the city. We're doing this not for our glory, but the glory of God and the salvation of sinners and the building up of God's people. Well, whether you're participating this Thursday in our public fast or not, or any other day in the future when you may do so. Again, if you find yourself wanting to grow, wanting to expand, wanting to deepen, to take it to your next level with God, then you should truly and sincerely today consider fasting. Again, what is fasting? Fasting is abstaining from any kind of food or pleasure for spiritual purposes. You can fast from all kinds of things, God's people. You can fast from food. You can fast from drink. But you can also fast from desserts or chocolate or iPhones or Androids or smartphones, or video games, online or in your console. It doesn't matter. Anything that once you remove from your life gets you better focused on God and the living beings, your loved ones around you. It is an outer action that leads to inner change. As I said last week, the old saying goes, we fast from food so that we can feast upon God. Now, let me interrupt by saying fasting is not a magical wand. It's a motivator. It's a means to get people closer to God through prayer and meditation. You might remember last week's sermon. I shared the many rewards of fasting. Jesus has promised your Father would reward you in secret for what is done in secret. And we learned about so many things. Drawing closer to God would be a reward. Showing God that you are truly sorry is another reward. Learning self-control is another reward. Getting closer to others around you as you free up tied up resources. And then just simply feeling great. Body, soul, mind, spirit. Well, today I'm going to dig in as your pastor and as a teacher of the word to address this topic. How do you do it? It's not enough for me to simply inspire you last week and then send you off unguided, uninstructed. Today, our first point, how do you fast? One day, a man announced to his family that he was going to fast and pray. And his 5-year-old shouted, "Daddy, you can't fast. You'll die." And Daddy said to his 5-year-old daughter, "Honey, men and women fasted all the time in the Bible." To which she replied, "Exactly, and they all died." All right, so how do you go about fasting? Is it a death wish? Well, the Bible describes what teachers have generally seen as three forms of fasting. And I'd like to review them with you today. For simplicity, we'll call them by the names absolute, normal, and partial. The first one is the hardest one of all. So let's just start with the hard. The absolute fast. The absolute fast. The absolute fast involves no eating and no drinking of water for a season, normally 3 days or less, and I might even emphasize the less. Let's just say you shouldn't do this one over 40 days. Not a good idea. Now, when I was involved years ago in our presbytery's disaster relief committee, and I've done disaster relief work, I've been on disaster relief trips, I was even in the providence of God in an earthquake in Haiti back about 15 years ago. And in that course of time, I learned a little bit about disaster relief, and I learned what's called the 4-4-40 rule. And it's this basic guideline: the human brain can go 4 minutes without oxygen. It can go 4 days without water. It can go 40 days without food, in general. Now, there are exceptions, but that's a general rule to help keep in mind. 4 minutes of oxygen, 4 days of water, 40 days without food, and then you die. Likely, you die. Now, that means that your body can go remarkably long without food. Maybe longer than you realized that your body can go without food. However, you can go much less time without water. And so in our generation, where we're all struggling to remember to hydrate, I just want to bring that out. Your body needs a lot of liquids, a lot of water, but a lot less food. So when you feel hungry, drink some water. You can go a long time without that food, but not water. So this is what we see happening in the Bible, these absolute fasts without food and without water. That's why Ezra fasted the way he did when he chose to mourn over the sins of God's people in Ezra 10, verse 6. It says, "Then Ezra withdrew from before the house of God and went to the chamber of Jehohanan, the son of Eliashib, where he spent the night, neither eating bread nor drinking water, for he was mourning over the faithlessness of the exiles." And the absolute fast, that's the reason why Queen Esther issued her command to Mordecai during this season of national emergency and danger for God's people. In Esther 4:16, she said to him, "Go, gather all the Jews to be found in Susa and hold a fast on my behalf, and do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my young women will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." Saul of Tarsus engaged in a total fast. He was blind and dazed, having met the Lord Jesus on the road to Damascus. He fasted an absolute fast for 3 days. Acts 9:9 tells us, "And for 3 days he was without sight and neither ate nor drank." Now, let me just stop to pause and say there are a few examples of an absolute fast in the Bible that clearly required some sort of supernatural help. It was just a very divine moment. Moses, you'd expect, right? A guy like Moses to be one of those examples. He engaged in 2 back-to-back super fasts. Yeah, super fasts, without food, without water. One was during the giving of the law. That might be expected. What is now the Torah, the Pentateuch, the 5 books, and much in it. In Deuteronomy 9:9, Moses says, "When I went up the mountain to receive the tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant that the Lord made with you. I remained on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. I neither ate bread nor drank water. That's pretty intense. That's a super fast. Other super fasts was that one that you would expect to super fast. It was after the golden calf, like after the incident that could have utterly destroyed God's people for infidelity and idolatry. And it says in Deuteronomy 9:17, Moses says, "So I took hold of the 2 tablets and threw them out of my 2 hands and broke them before your eyes. Then I lay prostrate before the Lord as before, 40 days and 40 nights. I neither ate bread nor drank water because of all the sin that you had committed in doing what was evil in the sight of the Lord to provoke him to anger." That's Moses. The other super faster was Elijah. And Elijah, you might know how he raced through the desert, right, for 40 days in a bit of a maniacal state. 40 days without food and water as well. 1 Kings 19 tells us this. "And the angel of the Lord came again a second time and touched him," that is Elijah, "and said, 'Arise and eat, for the journey is too great for you.' And he arose and ate and drank, and then went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the Mount of God." All right, so I think we should all agree those are pretty special cases. There are certain things that are examples in the Bible, and then there are certain things that are just inimitable, ought not to be imitated. And setting those super fasts aside as special cases, what we learn from observing absolute fast in the Bible is the absolute fast is reserved for exceptional situations and spiritual emergencies. And that makes sense because you see, if you choose to ever do an absolute fast, you're going to need to make sure that your activity is restricted. Even though Elijah did run, in general, we don't run. You know, a good place to do an absolute fast is a spiritual retreat. When you go somewhere for a day and you get alone. Maybe you spend 12 or 24 hours to get away from everything and focus upon the Lord. Maybe you do this a week or 2 or a month or a year before a big decision must be made. Maybe a big event is in your life or a big decision must be made. That is a great time to do it. In fact, this is the most powerful kind of fast, this absolute fast. It's very difficult to do, but it will utterly set you apart to God. You will know what you're doing, and you will be cognizant of the fact that you're placing yourself before God that entire fast. Maybe you should do that before a big event in your life or a big decision to be made. Take an absolute fast for half a day or a whole day or multiple days, a weekend. Now, the absolute fast, I will admit, I don't have a ton of experience here. I've only done absolute fasting a few times in my life, and they were for shorter periods during times of decision making or during seasons pleading for spiritual renewal. And I will say it takes some planning. It takes some self-knowledge about yourself. You might even want to seek medical advice, like if you're vulnerable to this kind of thing, talking to your medical advisor or doctor or nurse practitioner to see if there's any concerns before you do this. That is the absolute fast. Now, from there, we go to the second kind of fast, and it's more popular. It's maybe what you tend to think of when you think of like hardcore fasting, and it is the normal fast. The normal fast involves abstaining from food, but not water. Abstaining from food, but still drinking water. Now, this appears to be the kind of fast our Lord Jesus did in the wilderness that I read from in Matthew 4 moments ago. During that fast, the writer, Matthew, explicitly says Jesus ate nothing. But he does not say he drank nothing. In Luke 4, verse 2, he writes, "For 40 days being tempted by the devil, and he ate nothing during those days, and when they were ended, he was hungry." Saying nothing about he was thirsty, just that he was hungry. Also, notice that during that moment when he had fasted from food for 40 days, Satan tempts Jesus to eat, not to drink. He says, turn these stones into bread, not strike the rock and turn it into water. All of this suggests that Jesus was fasting a normal fast for 40 days from food, but not water. In fact, as I said before, the human body ordinarily cannot survive 40 days without fluids, water, or juices, or anything like that without a miracle, some type of miracle. And so that's why this gets called the normal fast. Now, it's still hard to go without food, but at least you have hydration. And that takes a little bit of the pressure off, and you don't worry as much. Yes, your energy will drop, but you can adjust your activity. Now, a good way when one is doing also an ordinary fast is to set aside time to do so, like the absolute fast. However, a good way to maximize a normal fast is to, when you're hungry, you got to do something with the hunger. Like, the hunger isn't just to torture you, it is to guide you. And so one of the best things to do when you feel the hunger, when you feel the cramp, and it will come, focus on the scriptures that talk about Jesus as the bread of life, the heavenly manna. And tell your stomach, hey, I know that if I feed you, you're going to hunger again, but those who feed on Jesus hunger no more. Also, during a fast, an absolute fast, if you're thirsty and you want to drink, focus on Jesus as the living water who quenches you more than that water you would drink would quench you right now. Or if you're on a normal fast and you're allowed to drink water, well, as you're thirsty and you drink it, think about Jesus quenching you spiritually, just like that water is right now. Nothing tastes better than water when you're hungry and water's all you got. And you think about Jesus. So that's the way fasting works. Every time you have a hunger pain or a thirst pain, it becomes a means by which you focus on the true one who sustains you, Christ. Maybe you can schedule an absolute fast or a normal fast on a special day. Maybe on a day off, or on a Saturday, or on a special time, because you're going to be thinking about food and or water a lot. Now, I move to the third kind of fast, and this one encourages me to encourage you to make it a regular feature in your life. That's right. It's called this partial fast, and this fast is a very flexible fast. What it is, it involves an intake restriction. You're simply restricting the intake of certain things. Maybe you abstain from food, but you drink water and you drink juice and you drink, some type of juices. Or maybe you just abstain from certain luxuries that you've grown to really rely on each day. Coffee, carbohydrates, all of my drugs of choice, chocolate, candy, sweets, delicacies, or technology, or streaming services, or online connectivity. Now, you still will have some kind of pains and discomforts with this fasting, but the benefit is that you can go on with your day. And still, when you feel the pain in an ordinary day, turn your mind to God and pray. In Daniel chapter 10, we see Daniel actually engage in 2 partial fasts in the book of Daniel. Commercial break, we're doing it at night. The book of Daniel, you can learn more about Daniel. Tonight's sermon is the writing on the wall. And that's a powerful, powerful message. But Daniel chapter 10, 2 and 3 says this: "In those days, I, Daniel, was mourning for 3 weeks. I ate no delicacies, no meat or wine entered my mouth, nor did I anoint myself at all," no showers, "for the 3 full weeks. Wow. And what was the result, by the way? Well, you can hear that sermon in a number of weeks when we get to Daniel chapter 10, but Daniel won a spiritual victory over powerful spirits of darkness threatening God's people. And then I mentioned last week, remember that story? We've already covered it on Sunday night. Daniel and his 3 friends insisted on eating only vegetables and water, not from the king's table, while they were in exile. It was a temporary fast, not permanent, because tonight you're going to see Daniel's actually at a feast. When the writing is on the wall, Daniel's not still eating vegetables and drinking water only. He's at the king's table. It was temporary, and he did it. And what was the result? God blessed those young men with health and spiritual power, such that when the king interviewed them, he found no one wiser in all of his land than Daniel and his friends. John the Baptist made partial fasting a hallmark of his whole ministry. It was one partial fast. He ate this very simple diet, and he wore very simple clothing. His clothing choices were part of his fast. He took off the designer labels. He walked away from Jerusalem's delicacies and dwelt in the desert. Matthew 3:4 describes it. It says, "Now John wore a garment of camel's hair and a leather belt around his waist, and his food was locusts and wild honey." Why? This left him lean and rugged for spiritual ministry. This left him unbeholden to Jerusalem. He required on no merchants from the city, no patrons from the city, no kingly promises from the city. He didn't need the city. He was self-contained, lean, and ready to preach a message that generally upsets people. Change. Change. Like, repent, it really upsets people. Just change, period. Can make people mad. And so he lived a whole lifestyle of partial fasting so he could remain effective. Now, there are many other examples of the partial fast. In modern day and in church history, you can read about certain practices. Some people have chosen to partially fast by omitting one meal during the day, maybe lunch. Maybe you're at work or at school, and you can go apart somewhere away from the cafeteria and skip lunch and go pray. And that would be a partial fast. It's very flexible, the partial fast, as I said, when a normal fast just is not possible for you. And for some of you, it's not a good idea to go a full fast, a regular fast, or an absolute fast. So you can replace a normal fast with a partial fast. In fact, this coming Thursday, it's a work day, it's a school day. Maybe you can't do an absolute fast or a normal fast, but you could this Thursday do a partial fast. And you can set the whole day, this Thursday, when we ordain JC that night, you can set it apart for a partial fast. Maybe you are an older Christian. Maybe your body is older. Maybe you're vulnerable. Maybe you're going through some type of treatment for chronic disease, and you're not a good candidate for the full absolute fast. Or maybe you're really young. You're a child. It's just not appropriate for you to go without food and water for a long season of time. You can do a partial fast. Guys, the partial fast can be a very good friend. In fact, I would say that you get partial fasting under your belt, and that is a stepping stone to the normal and then even the absolute fast that one day you're going to need in a crisis moment. And you need to pray, you need to confess, you need to plead, and you need guidance for a big decision. If you're partial fasting, you'll be ready when needed to do your absolute fast. And so those are the three kinds of fasting in the Bible: absolute, normal, partial. And I would challenge you, if you've not yet fasted in your life, to begin this week, to try it this Thursday, even a partial fast this Thursday. But the final leg of this sermon, I want to answer the question, what about after this Thursday? And that brings us to our next point. How often should you do this? How often should you fast? Well, if we look at our text, it seems to me that at a minimum, fasting should be done at least on special occasions. As providence dictates, as needs arise, fast. Notice our text doesn't tell us much more than Jesus and his apostles. Well, Jesus simply says, when you fast. And if you scour the New Testament letters, the apostles are not laying down any particular rules about fasting apart from the admonition of Jesus, when you fast. And so this frequency of fasting engages our Christian liberty. It is a matter of conscience between you and your Lord. Now, let me give you a little background for some framing of it. It's helpful to note that in the Old Testament, the believers were required to fast once a year. And that was on the Day of Atonement, a day of mourning over sin and being forgiven. Now, by the time of Zechariah, God's people seemed to be required to fast at least 4 times a year. We see this in Zechariah 8:19. It says, "Thus says the Lord of hosts, the fast of the 4th month, and the fast of the 5th, and the fast of the 7th, and the fast of the 10th should be to the house of Judah seasons of joy and gladness, and then cheerful feasts. Therefore, love, truth, and peace." However, fast forward from Zechariah to the 1st century days of Jesus, those Pharisees had turned fasting into a legalistic custom. They taught if you were to truly be set apart to God and to truly be pure and to truly be pious, that you had to fast twice a week, Mondays and Thursdays. And such frequent and mandatory fasting was not good for God's people. You see, anytime the church requires a level of fasting beyond what the scriptures require, abuse is coming. And you read some church history and you will see how much abuse developed around the theme of fasting. In fact, that explains why so many Protestant churches today, there's a lot of ignorance about fasting. Because fasting had been so abused that some of the churches just threw it out altogether as useless. The post-apostolic church in the first early centuries started fasting early on Wednesdays and Fridays, and then you could see in church history how it started to turn into an obligation. Fasting manuals were written, rules were supplied that could not be found in the canonical scriptures. The heavy yoke of fasting was mandated on the neck of the church. And it was a yoke that Jesus neither commanded nor honestly that the church could joyfully bear. It was too much. Now, having said that, I'd like to warn you against the other danger. And that is having no custom of fasting in your life. There is real value in each one of us having a custom of fasting in our lives. Jesus says to you today, now when you fast. And if you have no custom, you can't do what he says. So a routine fast, and this is where it could vary. It could be something of some kind you do once a week, once a fortnight, once a month, or once a something. And that will, dear church, free up valuable energy and time for spiritual focus upon God. I know of one seminary professor in my history who gave up his midday meal every day in order to meet with God somewhere on that campus alone. Whatever it is, I will tell you, routine is a beautiful tonic. Spiritual routine, spiritual disciplines is a beautiful spiritual tonic to draw your body and your soul closer to God. And so that's my challenge to you. If you do not have a custom of fasting, create one. Start this Thursday. Commit any time a public fast is declared, you'll participate. Then ask yourself, what could I do something weekly, monthly, or could I do something in my lifestyle permanently, where my lips will never touch this or do that, so that I can think about God anytime I wish to imbibe. Of course, there are special occasions when the church calls a public fast, and we've done so this Thursday. You can see in the Bible this occurred. King Jehoshaphat called the nation to fast when Judah was invaded. In 2 Chronicles 20, 1 through 14. So when God's people feel spiritual or physical danger to the church or to the city or nation in which they live, a fast is appropriate for the church to call. Even the pagan city of Nineveh undertook a fast as a result of a good sermon by Jonah's preaching. And so you and I are called to public fast during times of crisis, and the church will call for you to fast during seasons that warrant it. And so that's my challenge to you. If you see a serious crisis in the church or in the nation, if you see a spiritual need in the church, ours is this Thursday for our church planter to be ordained and launched. That is a fine time for church leaders to call for prayer and fasting. And so that is why we close with the reminder this Thursday is our public day of prayer and fasting. I would urge all of us, even you little kids, the young ones, you can find an appropriate thing to not do that day. When you come home from school this Thursday, maybe you have your little ritual and you turn on your little screen time thingy. I don't know what kids do these days. I'll know in a couple years when I hang out with my granddaughter, but I don't know what you kids do right after school like we did in the early 2000s. But whatever it is, I know you can decide not to do it that day and pray for JC. Pray for the church. Pray for the gospel to go forward into the city. And maybe this Thursday you will try a partial fast. Maybe this Thursday you'll try a normal fast. You'll go without food for half a day or the whole day while drinking water and fluids, and then come here and we're going to feast afterwards with a light amount of dinner and food right afterwards. Maybe this Thursday you are up for the total fast. No eating or drinking at all the whole day to pray for our mission work and to pray for JC. Maybe your life this Thursday is such that you don't have obligations. You could be more sedentary. You could be more still. You could set the day apart to pray for this Great Commission initiative. Well, whatever it is, this Thursday I urge you to partake. Pray for JC, pray for Ascension, pray for the salvation of many in the city. Let Christ draw near to us as we draw near to him. Let us fast